Boom. All right, good evening, brothers. I hope all of you all are well. I hope y'all had a wonderful day yesterday celebrating our good brother Dr. King on MLK Day. And for all of my college brothers, I hope y'all had a great start to y'all semester today. I appreciate all of y'all for taking some time out of your evening to join us for this special presentation and really a conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion and the role and impact that it plays on our fraternity today. Now, leading this presentation and conversation, we have a special treat, one of our very own brothers, Brother Arthur Gregg. Brother Arthur L. Gregg is the owner and CEO of Gregg Training and Consulting, LLC. He recently retired as the Assistant Vice President for Multicultural Affairs and founding director of the Multicultural Center at the University of Texas at Dallas, where he was responsible for the Multicultural Center, as well as diversity initiatives, trainings, and cultural competency programs for the UTD campus. He is a past president of the Texas Association of Black Personnel in Higher Education and a graduate of Leadership Richardson. Brother Gregg also serves as a co-lead facilitator for the Leadership Institute. Also, he's one of the creators of and serves on the steering committee for the Aiming for the Stars African American Male Academic Bowl, which is in its 14th year. Brother Gregg is known for his presentations and workshops on topics ranging from diversity, equity, and inclusion, the multi-generational workforce, and leadership development. He was initiated into Alpha by way of the Gamma Pi Lambda chapter back in the spring of 1990, and currently he is an active member of the Zeta Lambda chapter, where he serves as the chair of the Professional Development Committee. Brother Gregg received his Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of Houston and a Master's of Education in Higher Education from Dallas Baptist University. Ooh, that's a wordy bio that we got there, but it's a lot of credentials. So you can see he's very qualified to speak on this topic. So now let's all welcome the esteemed Brother Arthur Gregg. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brother Matt. I appreciate it. Yeah, sometimes you have to kind of remind yourself of who you are and what you bring to the table. And so thank you for that. It's always good to always hear your bio. Thank you for the applause, brother from ZT. So I want to first off thank you, Brother Matt, for inviting me to be amongst this esteemed group of young men, my collegiate brothers. My goal in life really is to, I like one of the last sentences of House of Alpha, because I do believe that Alpha is the school for the better making of men. And so that's where I find my passion is working with our college brothers in mentoring young men. And so thank you for inviting me out. I want to thank Brother Robinson for his leadership for our district, as well as Brother Williams, who set all of this up on the Zoom and all that good stuff. So let's jump into it. I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna get into this whole conversation about DEI. So just to preface this by saying that I'm not an expert. I just play one on TV, I've got about 25 years of experience in working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've added belonging to this because in corporate America now, you will begin to hear more than just diversity, equity, and inclusion. Belonging is the fourth piece to this that makes up the whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so tonight is more so about getting the information out, doing some education. It's interactive. So if you have any questions, Brother Merritt's going to be handling the chat. You can drop them in the chat. If you don't, if you're more of a chat type person, but if you have a question or you want to unmute, ask your question, let's go for it. So let's just start out talking about where, well, let me give you a little bit more insight on where this whole concept of DEI came from. So, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has been out there for years. It started out as EEO, equity, you talk about equal equity or equal opportunity, equal employment opportunity. So that's kind of like the beginning of when we talk with the EEO. You heard a lot about EEO. And so it wasn't really until after the murder of George Floyd that you really started to hear this more so about this concept of DEI. And a lot of it was through corporate world, not corporations who were saying, Now what do? We've got, we got a diverse workforce. We got all these folk in here. And so what do we do? Because, you had individuals who were being marginalized who were saying, hey, I'm not feeling this anymore. I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like y'all hear me. Y'all don't see me. I'm not being promoted. You're not listening to me. And so this whole concept, but you start to see more of this whole concept of DEI. So as we jump into why. So why diversity? Why do we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Why is this important? Very simple. Research shows that organizations who prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, have better retention, more satisfied participants, better internal decision-making, more innovation, and better financial returns, period. So when you think about it, it's about retention, it's about participation, it's about decision-making, it's about innovation and financial returns. So why would we talk about that in the fraternity? The same thing, for the same reasons. Retention, how do we get brothers, how do we keep brothers engaged? How do we get brothers to participate or satisfy participants? Brothers that keep coming back, wanting to do more. Better internal decision-making, as well as innovation. How do we move the fraternity forward? How do we move our chapters forward? How do we move our districts and our regions forward? And again, the more brothers that are active and participating, the more financial, it gives us a financial return. So when we think about DEI, we can look at it from different lenses. We can look at it from an organizational perspective. We can look at it from an educational perspective, as in higher ed. So thinking about, you have offices of diversity, equity, inclusion, or intercultural offices, and not just at PWIs. We're beginning to see these same type of offices at our HBCUs, simply because we are, just because it's a predominantly Black institution does not mean we're a monolith. So there's diversity within diversity. And so when we think about this, we think about it from, again, organization, we think about it from a corporate, and we think about it from a societal standpoint. So when we think about, again, looking at the big picture, why diversity? So when people ask, well, we've had a Black president. Okay, that's good. So why diversity? Is because, again, retention, participation, satisfied participants or participation, internal decision-making, innovation, and financial return. So I throw out to you, in your mind, to anyone to think about, what is diversity? What is diversity to you? And so anybody wants to kind of, there's no right or wrong answer. So if anybody wants to unmute and kind of throw your definition out there, what do you think diversity is? We'll give you a few moments.
Is that recording?
No.
If anybody, and now ask brothers, please put your phone, yeah, here we go, on mute as well. So if anybody that wants to unmute and kind of throw out, what is diversity to you? I think we got something in the chat.
Is it, hello?
Go ahead.
Is it, I want to say, the separation or the divide between like different backgrounds, different races, personality?
Okay, that's a great shot. And it's a part of that. I think Brother Sewell has a group of people or things, a group of people or things that have multiple or a multitude of perspectives and experiences. True. That's true. That's diversity. Diversity has many definitions. You can go to the dictionary. Let's see, Brother Maryland says, bringing different perspectives and cultures together for a common goal. Exactly. It's all of the above. Tonight, from the perspective when we talk about diversity, I'm going to share some definitions and some terminology to think about when we think about organizations, we think about society, we think about some of our corporate thought when we think about diversity. And so let's look at some terminology. So we're talking about diversity now, and specifically when we think about organizational diversity. Diversity is the range of human differences including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, social class, physical ability or attributes, religious or ethical value system, national origin, and political beliefs. So it is everything that makes us unique, individual, and in some cases collective. So when we think about then that's the D in DEI. So when we think about diversity, again, think about all of those different pieces. And I think a lot of times when we think about diversity, it's easy for us to go black, white. It's easy to stay in the race and the origin, the national origin space. But diversity is all that. Diversity is, again, I like the multicultural, the multi-generational workforce, your age. You know, we're not all the same age. We all have different experiences. And so that's, we're thinking about tonight in terminology, we're thinking about diversity from that perspective. We think about equity. Equity is providing people with the necessary resources that fit their circumstances. And we're going to talk a little bit more about equity and understanding the difference between equity and equality, because I think sometimes we get those two confused, and they're two totally different concepts. So that's the E when we talk about DEI. The I, again, inclusion. Inclusion is the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. So when we think about the different things that bring us together, or our human differences as diversity, we think about providing people with the resources that fit their circumstances, which is equity. And now we're thinking about the practice or policy that provides the access opportunities for people who may otherwise be excluded, marginalized. So that's the inclusion. So that it's kind of like, if you just had those three, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's kind of like diversity would be inviting someone different to a dance. Equity would be inviting them to be a part of the committee to determine what the dance is going to be, what songs are going to play, what it's going to look like, and they're bringing their talents to the table. Inclusion is inviting a person to dance. You know, it's one thing we can invite them to a party, but if we just invite them and they just there, inclusion is including them in the dance. So I kind of like to throw that out. But I also want us to think beyond inclusion to belonging. And that's the last piece of this. And you'll hear a lot more as you are moving in the corporate world, or when you hear more about diversity, equity, inclusion, you'll hear this concept of belonging. And belong is simple. None of this is rocket science. It's all common sense. Belonging is a unique and subjective experience that relates to a yearning for connection with others, the need for positive regard, and the desire for interpersonal connection. So when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging is that piece that ties all of this together. You can have a diverse workforce, a diverse organization. It can be equitable to all the members. You can be inclusive in the work that you do and how people feel about the organization, but belonging is the piece that keeps them there. People have got to feel like that they can connect, they have to make the connection. They got to connect to it. They got to connect to others in the organization. You know, we can't just stop with including people. We've got to make people feel like they belong. And I think that's the key to this whole understanding the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion is belonging. Same thing, same concept we got to do with the frat. How do we celebrate our diversity? How do we make it equitable to our brothers? How do we make brothers feel included? And then how do we make brothers feel like they belong? And so when we look at that, that's a major concept: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The last piece to this is intersectionality. And this is a concept that you'll hear more about, probably, again, when the work sector. And the thing I really like about intersectionality, it is a concept and a construct in theory that was developed by African-American female. And intersectionality is a framework for conceptualizing a person, group of people, or social problem as affected by a number of discriminations and disadvantages. It takes into account people's overlapping identities and experiences in order to understand the complexity of prejudices they face. So when we think about intersectionality, for me, I think about intersectionality as being African-American, that's one of my identities. Being male, that's another one of my identities. Being quote unquote a baby boomer, meaning we look at the multi-generation system, as a baby boomer, that's another one of my identities. And so each one of those make up who I am, but each one of those brings to me a different type or form of discrimination. So I can be discriminated not just against being a man, African-American, but being an African-American man, but being an African-American man of a certain age. So when we think about this, intersectionality is another big piece that you'll begin to hear when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The female, the sister who built the construct actually was coming from a place from African-American females who were in, say, science fields, all the multitudes of discriminations based on the different identities that they connect to is intersectionality. So just some terminology, some things to keep in mind and to think about as you are thinking about this thing called diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we look at, I talked earlier about understanding the difference between equity and equality. So I'm gonna get Brother Merritt to help on this piece. Brother Merritt, so I'm gonna have people to put it in the chat, which they think is which. So we're gonna say box A is the box to my left with the 3 boxes that are the same size. Box B is going to be the box on the right side with the individuals on the different boxes. And so just in the chat, put which box is equity and which box is equality. And that's everybody. Just what you think is equity and what you think is equality. Box A is the box with the 3 boxes where everybody's standing on the 3 boxes. Box B has the 3 boxes and everybody has a different stance. And let's just see what you think here. Yeah. Good stuff. I mean, y'all don't need me, y'all got this. And that's true. It is. You're right. Everybody gets an A. When we think about equality and we think about equity, equality means each individual group of people is given the same resources or opportunity. So we go back to the slide. Everybody got the same box, but can everybody see over the fence? When we think about equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed. So when we're looking at this box, now everybody can see over the fence, but everybody necessarily doesn't have a box. So when we think about equity, again, it's going back to understanding that equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed. Yeah, I want to be treated equally, but I want my equity. I want what is needed. And I think understanding, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, I think when we think societal, when we think in the corporate world, everybody is, well, we're all equal. No, we're not. Well, let's strive for equality. No, let's strive for equity. And so when we're thinking about diversity, and that's why it is so important that all of these go together: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and of course, belonging. So I just wanted to kind of spend just a little bit of time because, again, I think sometimes we get the two confused. or we think that they're interchangeable. And equality is good, in my opinion. In my opinion, equity is what we strive for. All right. So another concept to understand is understanding bias. What is bias? Along with implicit or unconscious bias. We've heard a lot about that. We hear a lot about that. We think about biases, and the thing about biases that really get me is that we think, oh man, that's bias. We all have biases. Just as human beings, as people, we have biases. And so I think the thing about that is that we have to come to grips with that we have them and understand what they are. Bias is an unreasoned or unfair distortion or of judgment in favor or against a person or a thing. We all have biases against things. Now, when we think about implicit or unconscious bias, that's another concept, because that's a bias or prejudice that is present but not consciously held or recognized. It's there, but we don't think about it. We don't really. It's kind of there, and it's in our mind, and that's often our blind spot. We think about it. We think about biases. It's often, oftentimes it's a blind spot for us, because we're like, oh, I don't, I'm not biased against anything, or I don't like, or we're going, I like every M&M, but I just don't like the black M&M. Why you don't like the black? I just don't like, a black licorice. And again, understanding bias and implicit bias, but knowing that that's a blind spot for us all. And we think about blind spots, it's hard to see the picture if you're in it. So I want to share a little video that kind of talks to, or kind of does a little bit more explanation about what a blind spot is.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Don't trust.
She's a woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's job.
She's clearly not educated.
Maybe not. She can speak English.
That's not me. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume? Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
So just quick, wanted to get your thoughts on about blind spots. Any thoughts about that?
It's not good to assume.
Actually, exactly. Exactly. We talk about a lot about the things that people assume about us, whether it's individually, being an African American male, being African American. We talk about what people assume about us being members of a fraternity. We think about where we come from and things of that nature. But how often do we do the same thing to other people? It's easy to sit with people who look like us. It's easy to connect them with people who maybe come from the same area as us, maybe have the same kind of dress the way we do, or the same mindset. But oftentimes our blind spots keep us from doing that. Our blind spots keep us from connecting with people who are different from us. And that's simply, again, the takeaway I want you to take away from this piece is, one, to admit, say, hey, I do have biases. I do have implicit biases. I have blind spots. Now that I know that I have them, what am I going to do to address them? Because what that does is make you better. Because see, when we think about it, we are made up of so many different groups and memberships. And I always use glasses and use the glasses because, and let me just back up. When you think about glasses, in particular, glasses that are prescribed, or prescriptive glasses, for those of you who wear glasses, when you put those glasses on, those glasses were prescribed based on you, based on your makeup, what your body makeup, your whatever's going on, what you see. Some people are farsighted, some people are nearsighted. And so when glasses are made, they're made specifically for you to be able to see clearly. Now, if you have a pair of glasses on that were prescribed for you, and the person next to you have on a pair of glasses that are prescribed for them, you can't wear each other's glasses. Those glasses that are prescribed for you, and that's how we see the world. So when we think about framing the issues and how do we see the world? How do we see people? How do we see the diversity of it? How do we see our blind spots? We got to realize what our prescriptions are on our glasses of the world. And I'm using glasses as a metaphor more so when we think about how we see things. So I'm just do a quick exercise. And this is individual. You can jot this down if you got a notepad or put it in your phone. But just think about that we each belong to groups based on our gender, race, our ethnicity, our age, our socioeconomic status, our education, our sexual orientation, our ability status. And when I say ability status, that could be a physical or learning disability. Our veteran status, are we a veteran or not, religion or spirituality, and our generation. And so we have all of these groups that we are part of in some sense. So for many of these groups, we hold a strong identification to, and for others, we don't, and that's an individual choice. And so, for example, I hold a strong identification with being being African-American, being Black, being male. And now I'm at an age where my generation, and I think about my spirituality. And when I say these groups, and I say I hold a strong connection or a strong identification with these are the things that I think about every day. When I wake up every day, I think about the fact that I'm a Black male who is 60 years old, who is spiritual. So when I see things, either people or situations, I see them from the perspective of a Black male who is 60 years old, who is spiritual. Now, what I don't think of every day is the fact that I am able-bodied, meaning that I can get up, I can walk, I can drive, I can take care of myself. What I don't think of every day is my education. What I don't think about Every day is my socioeconomic status. But they're still my groups. So I think about the ones that I hold the strong, I see more through the ones that I had the strongest connection with. And we all do. I mean, you know, I never thought about being able-bodied until I tore my Achilles tendon. And I was in a wheelchair for a couple of weeks. And you're talking about open my eyes? Because then I realized, so where are the ramps? How do I get in this building? How do I get around? You know, I roll up to a door. Who's gonna open the door? And people will walk right by you. So, but that wasn't a membership. That's not something I thought about every day because that didn't affect me every day. So when we think about these memberships, we think about what do we connect to? What do we hold the strongest connection with? And so what I want you to do is to take a few minutes and think about the memberships that you hold. Think about those memberships that you hold. What is it that you think about every day when we think about these memberships, about who you are? And then think about, and then imagine them displayed on the lenses of glasses that you wear daily. So imagine all of those on these glasses. It could be gender, it could be race, it could be spirit. Imagine them, the words on those glasses. And as you're thinking about that, that's how we see the world every day. So when we talk about why is it important for diversity, equity, inclusion, we got to understand how we're seeing situations in the world based on the memberships that we think about and that we hold daily. Important. So as you're thinking about that, think about those memberships. You know, if you jot them down, think about what you think about daily about you. Think about what you don't think about daily that you hold a membership to. And then think about how do those groups or memberships influence how you see and evaluate different individuals, circumstances, and situations. Because again, what you see is going to be based on out of your glasses. I share a story. I worked in an office office that had a huge window on a parking lot. So I'm looking at the parking lot one day, and I'm looking out, and I see a mother and a child. And the mother is just, you could tell she was upset. She was fussing at the child. She was kind of grabbing the child. And I'm seeing it as a, male, an African-American male, who at the time was, you know, I was still a little older, but I'm seeing it through the eyes of, you know, these children just don't listen. And she, you know, she's fussing at this kid, and what did the kid do? And I'm just making up these stories in my head about the situation. I'm going off on the mother in my head and in my little space. And it's interesting, I bumped into the mother a little later that afternoon, and I said, wow, I saw you out the window, and you were really going in on your child. I was like, you know, and I'm one of those kind of people though. And she said to me, she said, yeah, she said, I told him to stay next to me, and he darted out into oncoming traffic. And she said, it was fear, I was scared. See, I didn't know that piece. All I knew is what I saw out of my lens. And so I say that to say, sometimes we have to be very careful when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, of remembering how we're seeing things based on our lens. That's with people as well. And we have to believe, you know, we have to really think about how we see things, and then take a step back and say, hey, I'm looking at this through my lens, through all of these things that make me up. And so when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, this is my favorite quote. We do not see the world as the world is. We see the world as we are. And so as we're looking at that, we see the world as from who we are, from those lenses, from our experiences, from those memberships that we hold, from the lives that we've lived, as opposed to just seeing the world as it is. And oftentimes the world will show you who it is, We just always see it through our own lens. So we have to remember that when we're thinking about those pieces of inclusion, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So just I just put some questions out, some things to kind of think about. So I want to give you some time for any questions, some things to think about as we've talked about DEI and how it impacts the fraternity, how it impacts us individually, collectively, whether it's societal, through organizational. Why is DEI be important to the fraternity? Why is that important to who we are as Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated? How do you see diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging played out in your life, in the life of your chapter, and your fraternity, and the fraternity itself? I always want to, one piece I want to say is thinking about this in particular to brothers as we are programmed, particularly on campuses. Think about, everybody coming to your program is not in the mindset as you. How often do we think about, is our program accessible for individuals with disabilities? Because they're on our campuses. Can a student in a wheelchair get here and not have to sit in the back of the room? Can someone who is hearing impaired, can they come in and fully get the program? How do you deal with your implicit and unconscious bias or biases? How can we be more intentional in practicing DEIB in our fraternity, in our organization, in our chapters, in our regions, in our lives? And then what are your takeaways? What are you going to do different since you sat through this presentation? What are you going to do different? Those are some things to just think about. This has been recorded, so if I know that I am big on the multi-generational piece. So I understand if you snapping shots of the screen, slides, that's perfect. Because this is more about you than it is about me. It's about how do we individually, collectively move forward, move individually forward and move our organization forward. I found this quote, which it just sticks with me. Great leaders are not the best at everything. They find people who are the best at different things and get them all on the same team. It doesn't say anything about changing people. It just says they find people who are the best at different things. And oftentimes it's easier to get the people who are more like us. It's more convenient to get our friends. And all our friends are not meant for Alpha. I heard one of our general presidents say once, one of the brothers said, "Man, brother president, we should really go back and we should make Barack Obama honorary member." And the president said, "No, brothers, we don't make honorary members anymore." He said, "But I'm going to take it back to our collegiate chapters." He said, "Because Barack Obama was walking around his campus, but did we acknowledge him? Did we see him when he was on his campus in undergrad?" He said, "Barack Obama was working in his community. Did any of our graduate chapters look at this brother?" So when I think about that, I think about how do we have to find people who are best at different things when we think about who we want to be and we think about diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I take us back to what we started with. What we started with was why diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Retention, satisfy participants or participation, decision making, better decision making, innovation, and financial return. So brothers, I'm going to open it up now. If anybody has any questions or comments, whether it's in the chat, Brother Marion, we have a couple of minutes for that.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I'd like to hear thoughts. I'm gonna just throw this up real quick. So if anybody wanna, This is my contact info, and I'm gonna lead this up in just a second. And then I'm gonna go back to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody.
Brother,
So, go ahead,
I'll,
brother.
I'll start us off with the question. My question is, how would you advise that we as chapters, be it collegiate or alumni chapters, evaluate our own practices and principles to ensure that we're maintaining like diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments for our members and prospective members?
I think two ways. I think one is you got to have the conversation. You guys got you have to have the conversation in your group. Oftentimes we get so busy in the work of doing alpha, we don't have conversation about doing the work of the world. And so I think we got to have the conversation. The second thing we got to do is we got to start assessing our programs and what we're doing, which means we got to start asking people, you know, are you satisfied with what we're doing? Are we doing a good job? We don't assess, we don't do, and I say this for the fraternity, we could do a better job in assessing what we're doing by asking people, are we meeting the needs? You know, we do a lot of planning for other people, but we don't ask them if that's what they need. I always say real quick, I attend a predominantly Black church, which is in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. One year we did a Cinco de Mayo. We invited nobody from the neighborhood. We planned it. And so we planned it based on what we thought they need. This is Cinco de Mayo, so we're going to have a Cinco de Mayo program. Guess what? Nobody came. None of the neighborhood came. So when they came to our little meeting with the church in the neighborhood, they said, you know, you didn't ask us what we wanted. They said, what if we planned a Juneteenth program and then we didn't include you? And we had all the stereotypical stuff. It didn't meet our needs. Matter of fact, you're a Methodist church, we're all Catholic. But if you don't assess us and ask us what we're doing, if we're doing, so how do we have that conversation? You ask people, do you feel like you feel comfortable with our programs? You know, you do the same with the school, the institution. I think a lot of times our college brothers really, when it comes to our college brothers, we don't really tap into all the resources that the college and universities have as well. Have you thought about programming with other offices, programming with the Office of Disabilities, program with the Veterans Office, program with diverse offices, because one, you learn more about them and you learn more about their population. Two, you build your population, you build that diversity you're looking for. Any other questions, comments?
What made you pursue a career that was very focused in DEI?
It's interesting. That's a good question. One, there's no career path in DEI. You got to kind of create your own. They're beginning to build them out. But what made me really want to get into this is because, again, it goes back with my age. When I started school, I started predominantly Black elementary school. I started in the middle of desegregation in the height of busing, forced busing. So I was the only Black kid there. In my neighborhood, they tested all the Black kids in our neighborhood to see who would be bused to the white school. Out of all the kids in my neighborhood, only 5 Black kids. So every morning I got up before dawn, before my peers got up and got on the bus and went across town to a white school where I was too Black to be white, and came home to a neighborhood where I was too white to be Black. And so my growing up, my thing was, I want people to understand, you know, how can we make this better? How can we work together, or how can I promote my folk? And so the way I got to my career started was I saw a job working with Black and brown students, and I said that's what I want to do, because it was a Black man on my campus that said, bro, come here, man, fix your pants, fix your collar, go to class, get your education. And so I said I wanted to be that person. So that's how I really got into this DEI position, was to make sure that all voices at the table were heard. Because even in conversations where we all look alike, we still got to remember our voices need to be heard. And so that's how I kind of got into it, man. I kind of fell into it, and it's been lucrative. I'm just gonna say, you see a lot of corporations. If you go on LinkedIn now and look under diversity, equity, inclusion, you see the positions that are out there. You got a lot of corporations who made big promises and had big statements after the George Floyd murder. And so now we're a couple of years out. So now they got to learn how to implement all of those promises. So they're looking for people to help them implement this program or these things called diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's why I was so excited to be able to do this, to help you all understand what it is and to think about, hey, in engineering, they need DEI. In business, they need DEI. In education, there is a need for DEI. Whatever field you're in, there is a need for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging folk. So it's just another piece to add to your toolbox. And as and one of the brothers says in there is that, hey, there are not a lot of Black men who are in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So long story short, bro, some of it I think was divine. The other piece was looking to see where the gap was, to see where there was a need for me to both benefit, to make a difference, and two, to benefit to make some dollars. But great question. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer.
Oh, thank you. Any last comments, questions, thoughts? Hopefully, was this helpful? Hopefully you have a better understanding, a better view. But don't just stop with this. Continue to do the research. Be able to sit in rooms and talk about this stuff, because these are pieces with when you're starting an interview, when you're looking for career and things of that nature. These are things that people are going to want to know. Do you know this stuff? And if you use the terminology, man, this is being recorded. Take this stuff, ingest it, use it for you, be able to speak to it, because that could be the difference between you getting this job or that job. I'm just here to share that with you. We are the school for the better making of men, in particular brothers.
Any last questions? Like Brother Greg was saying, this is being recorded, so we'll make this as a resource for you all to share with your chapter members that weren't here, or to just go over for your own personal use. A lot of good information was shared here. Brother Greg, I just want to thank you for taking this time out of your day to share with us your expertise and all the knowledge that you have on DEIB. And I specifically like the aspect of adding the belonging into diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think I speak for a lot of people when we think of diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of times we just think of white versus Black, like you were saying earlier, but there's so many other things that make us diverse. So I really appreciate you for, sharing all of that. And I appreciate all the brothers for getting on here. I do want to recognize Brother Darren Nixon, our Southwestern Regional Assistant Vice President. Thank you for being on, brother. And I want to thank everybody else that's on the call as well. If we don't have any other questions or any other comments, I think that is we're gonna adjourn for the night. A reminder to all of y'all, go ahead and register for that Texas Alpha Day at the Capitol, which will be happening next week on the 24th, a week from today. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank y'all, brothers. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you, Brother Mary. You want to hang on a second?
Brother Mary, you have a great night.
All right, bro. What you think, man?